What I'm going to talk about today is primarily how we were able to capture these donkeys from the feral populations from the island of Nevis, and then how we got them acclimated to using them in reproductive research. So first of all, where the hell is St. Kitts and Nevis? We're a teeny little island in the Caribbean, about 250 miles southeast of Puerto Rico. It's a two island nation, so 2 islands, 1 country. St. Kitts is about 65 square miles. Nevis is about 40 square miles. So pretty small area. The donkey populations, or the largest donkey populations, are actually on the island of Nevis. Our university is on the island of St. Kitts. So our challenge was collecting these donkeys humanely and getting them moved to our research facility. So the reason that we wanted to do this is because the humane population management of donkeys in the Caribbean has been an increasing concern. The 2 reasons primarily we hear about why we want to control the populations is that there's a belief that there's donkeys out there that are fighting for food and starving, and welfare concerns about them. The other one, in my experience from traveling to multiple Caribbean islands, really has to do with a perceived overpopulation of the donkeys by the public. So being in the roadways, getting hit by car, or road traffic accidents as the Brits like to call it, feces in the roads and walkways, and then destruction of property, crops, the golf courses, ornamental foliage in yards, and getting in the garbage, because we do all that. There is a 4 Seasons resort on Nevis owned by Bill Gates, and they really frown upon it when the donkeys decide to wander across their meticulously groomed golf courses, so they don't like that. But the question of overpopulation, to me, I think depends on who you ask. On the left here is a small herd of donkeys in Nevis in a nice little shaded pasture. There's lots of roughage for them to eat. If you look at them, their body condition scores are really quite good. So in my opinion, if you ask the donkeys, they're not overpopulated. The picture on the right here is from the garbage dump in Barbuda, and I think it's interesting in that looks like not quite the nicest living conditions, and you might suggest that they are overpopulated. And if you look at this donkey, his tail and ear hair is all singed from going around and rummaging through the garbage dump, which is burned on a daily basis. These donkeys are not actually confined to the dump. This small herd sort of chooses to live there. And if you look at this body condition score of this donkey, it's really pretty good. I know the discussion yesterday came up about eating cardboard, and it is amazing to watch these donkeys. They'll go and just rip those plastic bags open and eat whatever's inside, including the cardboard. So what we did to acquire the donkeys is that we contracted Nevisian farmers to go out and humanely collect late gestation jennies for us. And they did that by baiting them with food and water into a paddock area, and then roping them and tying them to a tree for us. We went in with our research team and then placed halters on them, and we pushed them through a chute system. These are just panels that we brought with us to the neighboring island. Pushed them through this chute system, and then placed them in the modified stocks that I made so that we could examine them. So if anybody was at Ben's talk yesterday, we were getting the job done. All right. These donkeys had only had human contact for a few hours before we were then asking them to come through the chute system, stand in the stocks, and be examined. So I can't say this was the perfect scenario, but we did get the job done. So what I did was I took a commercially available set of miniature horse stocks and fortified them with a whole bunch of lumber, assuming that our donkeys were going to be a flight risk once we got them in there. And it really turned out to work out quite well for us. So once we had them in the stocks, we pushed them into the chute and had them in the stocks, and We performed transabdominal ultrasounds to confirm that they were truly in late-term gestation. We used a 5 to 2 megahertz convex probe and used what we knew about gestational age and confirmed that they were truly late gestation. Some of them we did not need a $35,000 ultrasound to diagnose that they were in late-term gestation. Part of our inclusion criteria was that they were between 2 and 12 years of age. So within the stocks, we did age them using a donkey aging chart. It was brought up yesterday that we need to remember that they're not horses and that they do shed their deciduous teeth and get their adult teeth erupt at later dates than horses do. So we want to accurately age them. And then from there, we place them on a trailer for road transport. So remember that we are on a little island in the middle of the ocean. Horse trailers, stock trailers, they're not available. So this is the closest thing we had available to transport donkeys. So again, you can see particularly the picture on the right, we're just getting it done, right? That donkey that's in the picture there, again, has had human contact now for all of about 5 to 6 minutes. I mentioned here, we left them loose in the trailer, about 5 to 6 donkeys per trailer load. We sort of found out that if we put reasonably squished them in there, so more on the 6 donkey total, that they actually trailered better because they could use the sides of the trailer and each other to balance. Obviously, they've never been on a trailer before either. Then we had to get them from Nevis to St. Kitts. And this is the car ferry that runs between the 2 islands. So it runs between the Narrows. And these are World War II land boats that the military used. And now it's used for transporting cars and freight back and forth between the 2 islands. So the challenge we really had there was, and anybody here that's ever backed up a utility trailer or a manure spreader knows that backing up a trailer that has a short wheel axis is difficult. Then do it on a moving target. So this boat comes up, drops its ramp on the land, and you're trying to back up this little trailer full of donkeys onto a moving target. We all got pretty good at doing that. Just last Monday, we brought over another load, and the weather had picked up, and the boat was actually almost 45 degrees from the landing dock and moving in the seas. So that was a bit of a trick. On this day, these tourists in this rental car got quite the experience on their ride back to St. Kitts because they got to look at donkey butts the entire ride back. So the area that we collected the donkeys was over here where it says Gingerland. So we drove the truck and trailer over and then across the Narrows on the boat. And then the trip from the peninsula to where it says Old Road here, which is where the university is about 12 miles over some pretty steep hills. So we took our time and drove slow, and the donkeys really tolerated it quite well. So once at our research park, we allowed the jennies to settle in for about a week in their new herd situation. They were handled once a day by our student volunteers. Just to be accustomed to being halter broke, led by a halter and lead rope. We started grooming and treat training just to keep our hands on them and get them used to the human interaction and allowing the students to start doing their routine physical exams. So here's another shout out to Ben again. This is when we were shaping behavior compared to the getting it done deal that we had to do over in Nevis. So once these jennies tolerated the handling by the students, we started to introduce them to the stocks again. Obviously, their first exposure to it was us really, physically pushing them in there so that we can examine them. So we kind of had to backtrack and get them used to it in a positive way. And obviously, everybody here that's worked with donkeys or owns a donkey know that they're really easy to coerce if you just give them something to eat. So just using a pelleted equine feed and coaxing them into the stocks and then just letting them stand there and eat and relax, they really became accustomed to it quite fast. This is one of our jennies This is the time frame here is probably about 4 to 5 weeks. And this Jenny is just standing there. She's paying attention to what's going on outside. Her ears are up. She has a bright eye, not looking overly concerned about what's going on. So once they were used to standing in the stocks, this is one of our donkeys. We call her Smiley. If you notice, she's actually missing a big portion of her upper lip. That's the way we found her. But she got so used to it that she would just wander into the stocks and stand there and wait for you. We even caught her one time where the back gate on the stocks was closed. She jumped over it to stand in the center of the stocks to wait to be fed. So they really got used to it pretty quick. So once they were used to standing in the stocks, we started our transabdominal ultrasounds again to monitor gestational age. We used previous published data to compare the gestational ages, measuring fetal heart rate, aortic diameter, orbit diameter. Here's our students. All three of the gentlemen here are students. We had a total of about 50 student volunteers involved in all of this process. So 24 of our 25 donkeys foaled without complications. Unfortunately, one of them aborted shortly after arrival onto St. Kitts after being treated for hyperlipemia. My bad on that one. But the Jenny did very well herself, but she did abort. So about 1 week after foaling, we started transrectal ultrasounds to look at the uterine and ovarian structures and start to monitor their heat cycles. You can see in the picture on the left, the donkeys were restrained only by the confines of the stocks. And it's a little bit difficult here, but you can see the donkey's eye, and her head is actually in a feed tub hanging there, and she's just having herself a little breakfast while the student performs this rectal examination. This is now about 6 to 8 weeks post arrival on St. Kitts. This here is just one of my favorite pictures because the donkeys got so used to our weekly process, and it's hard to see here, but Travis actually is performing a rectal ultrasound on a donkey standing in the stocks, and he and the other donkey that are waiting to go next is watching the monitor. So our foals were entered into our handling and physical exam program, again getting them used to human contact. The foals were weaned 4 to 6 months after. We did do a little bit of a behavior observation on the jennies as far as weaning goes. They definitely seem to be less reactive than horses are during a weaning process. Most of them returned to the herd in normal grazing within a few hours. The jacks were castrated prior to adoption, and all of the foals were adopted out to the public. And actually, when I say the public, all 24 donkeys were adopted to people that work for our university in our animal care division. So the guys that take care of the animals on a daily basis, we had a waiting list. They wanted more, so it was nice. They all went to good homes to graze down roughage around homes and guard sheep from the feral dogs. We used 3 jacks to detect estrus in our jennies. So there's a small paddock here where the 3 jacks were turned loose. The jennies were tied on the posts intermittently, and the jacks would go around and go ahead and tease them. And if any of you haven't had the chance to observe estrus behavior in a donkey, it's worth, I probably should have put a video here, but it's worth Googling because to me it's entertaining that the mouthing behavior they do and their ears and their vocalization, they almost seem like they're in pain, but interesting compared to horses. This is the estrus detection scale that we came up with and graded those, correlating that with our rectal ultrasound findings of their ovaries. So what we found with this is that these feral donkeys quickly became amenable as research subjects. I want to point out that we never used any sedation or any other physical restraint other than a halter and lead rope. We never used a twitch. We never twitched their ears. All we did was a lot of treat training and the grooming and touching, and they really quickly came around. So we're pretty confident that we could continue to use this method, and we actually have since we've done this first group. We have another 30 donkeys that we've collected in the last 3 weeks, and we feel as though that the method worked very well, that the donkeys were pretty relaxed about it. We didn't put them under any significant stress other than obviously the initial capture. And we believe we can continue to keep doing this. So this is just a little example of our two chute system, stock system. We have all the students involved. We have a donkey here that's getting a rectal palpation, and this one's having another rectal ultrasound, and only restraints are the stocks themselves. So just a little bit about the research that we're actually doing with these donkeys. We are working on a PZP immunocontraceptive project. I think most everybody is pretty aware of that product. We did compare the commercially available native PZP to a recombinant formulation that came from some researchers that we're collaborating with at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. I'm looking at salivary and fecal cortisol levels in these donkeys. So as we all know, they don't show stress very well. So it'll be interesting to see what their cortisol levels look like throughout this process. So from capture and including through the vaccination protocol. Lactational anestrus, we have a little paper coming out on that in this group. Some follicular and corpus luteum dynamics, and some mobility of the early donkey conceptus. So we kind of started out with just the PZP project in our minds, and then as you all know, that you can just keep creating more and more papers and more questions as you go along. Just real quick, this is sort of the model for our PZP project. We used again the recombinant version and the native version in the Freund's adjuvant. Unfortunately, in our situation, although we had 100% efficacy, we did get complete ovarian shutdown in both of those groups. We had a 100% abscessation rate. They were all sterile abscesses, but they were 100% of them abscessed due to our vaccine, and probably the Freund's adjuvant. You see 38% of our controls also had them. We opened and drained and treated them, and none of the donkeys have any long-term effects from it, but obviously that's not going to be very useful in a real life situation. So I mentioned a little bit about the fecal and cortisol, fecal and salivary cortisol levels that I was looking at associated with the vaccination and capturing these donkeys. Still working on the validation of the enzyme immunoassay for that in the donkey. It's been validated in horses, so we shouldn't have a problem doing it in the donkey. The lactational anestrus is sort of interesting. You can look for this in a journal coming to you soon. That 8 of our 25 donkeys did not cycle or produce a CL until after their foals were weaned. So it's sort of interesting because it hasn't been documented being very common in horses, but here we had over 30% of our donkeys show us what we consider to be a lactational anestrus, and we do have the progesterone levels to support that. We had a master's student do a follicular dynamics study. If you guys have kept up with the donkey repro literature, there was just a very nice paper that looked very similar to this that came out from a researcher in Mexico. So I don't know what we're going to do with this. They beat us to it. We're looking at the mobility of the early donkey conceptus. So our control donkeys that didn't get the PZP vaccine, of course, came right back into heat, and when they were exposed to the jack, got pregnant very easily. So we sort of mimicked Ginther's paper in the equine, looking at mobility in the donkey. So in our future research, we'd really like to look at the behaviors associated with the herd in relation to the PZP vaccine. And there has been some stuff done in the horses. Most of it doesn't agree as to what happens to the social structure when we stop the jennies from cycling. And our previous project only looked at the changes in estrus behavior, not in the group. So We do probably need to figure out if it does alter the social behaviors in the herd, that we'll have to decide whether the PZP is really suitable for use in these feral populations. So again, in the future, obviously, we had 100% abscessation rate. I think we need to improve upon that before we can use it for real. So minimizing the reactions by changing our adjuvant, and minimizing the injection number of boosters required to do that. Even though PZP's been around for 25 years or more, we still don't really know how it works, so it would be good to figure out exactly how that is working and then see the duration of effect. Our donkeys that were vaccinated September of last year, we still have about 50% of them that are not cycling. So over a year of what we know about our donkeys so far. And then eventually bringing it to a field trial on Nevis. Here's a picture of, we don't have very many working donkeys in Nevis anymore, but there's an example of one of them bringing the grass probably to the sheep and goats. So here's another picture of one of our working donkeys in St. Kitts, and that's Bob, and that's Michelle, the monkey, sitting on top. We do have a very, very large population of green vervet monkeys in St. Kitts. That's a whole nother population issue because they are used in the tourist trade, not in the most ideal situations. I personally know the Rostaman that owns these two animals, and he does care for them and take care of them quite well, but there's definitely some welfare concerns both for the donkeys and the monkeys associated with that. So that's what we did. I'm not saying we did it perfect, but we did get it done, and believe that we learned a lot from it and continue to be able to do the same. So, thank you.